We thought it might be nice to look at what the federal government is doing to maybe enable cities to become better partners in the future of automobility and autonomous vehicles. So we're going to look for a moment at what the U.S. Department of Transportation Smart Cities Challenge has provided. And you've heard a little bit during this time period together about what this is, but maybe not enough. So this is our opportunity to have Amanda Eaken from the Natural Resources Defense Council here in the Bay Area bring together a panel for you to raise and answer the question, what is this program and how is Columbus going to take us to the future? Spencer, it's all yours. Amanda, thank you so much.
Thank you, Gordon. And I just want to start by saying that I have admired Meeting of the Minds for a long time, and that I actually enjoyed, if you can believe it, spending 4 straight hours talking about autonomous vehicles policy with Spencer and others yesterday, because the collection of people you have brought together for this event is so impressive. And a special appreciation to Jesse Feller-Hahn, who I believe put together this entire event with a 1-year-old at home while working from home. So I want to give her a round of applause for that. I don't know how she pulled that off. So like many of you, I watched with excitement and fascination as USDOT and Vulcan announced their $50 million Smart City Challenge last fall. The purpose of the challenge was to identify the most forward-thinking city in America, to leverage advanced technologies such as shared mobility and autonomous vehicles to solve some of our most pressing urban challenges like climate change, congestion, access to opportunity. 78 cities responded, 7 were finalists, and they spent months ideating new creative solutions. And then, of course, Columbus, Ohio was the winner announced in June. We are extremely fortunate today to have with us 2 of the leading creators of the Smart City Challenge. Sophie Shulman is a senior policy advisor with the U.S. Department of Transportation. She was right at the heart of the Smart City Challenge, probably flying around the country more than she's ever done in her life, working closely with the cities, advising them on applications. Spencer Reeder is a senior program officer for climate and energy at Vulcan, co-convener of the challenge with USDOT, and he led the electric vehicles portion of the challenge. To my way of thinking, Sophie and Spencer are sitting on a gold mine. And the information generated through this challenge probably represents some of the most cutting-edge thinking for how to solve our urban mobility challenge. So it's worth spending a moment to understand what we have learned through this challenge and also what should happen next. So our goal is to bring you the latest and greatest from the Smart City Challenge, including a bit of a sneak peek on what Columbus plans to do with its $50 million, what some of the other cities, the 6 finalists who didn't quite win, what they're planning to do, what they'll carry forward, and then how you can get involved to advance these concepts in your own communities. So I'd like to start with a question for Spencer, and this is on a topic that, in my opinion, we have not heard nearly enough about in this presidential election and debate season, which is climate change. So Spencer, from a climate standpoint, what excites you the most about what Columbus is doing? How is the $50 million going to help Columbus become a model city? And then what mechanisms are in place to monitor their progress? We spent a lot of time at the front end of challenges with big proposals, but what are we going to do to make sure we're actually hitting those milestones?
Thanks, Amanda. It's great to be here. This is my first Meeting of the Minds, so unlike you, I've learning about this in real time, but it's a pleasure to be here. I'm accused of coming down from Seattle and bringing rain, I assure you. It was not intentional. I'm glad that you mentioned climate because that is our focus. Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, is the lead of Vulcan. I work in his philanthropy organization. And a lot of people have asked, well, why would Paul Allen be interested in electric vehicles and the Smart City Challenge? Many of you probably know in February of this year, the transportation sector overtook electricity production as the #1 source of greenhouse gases in this country. So as the person on point for him to develop ideas around climate change, it was sort of an obvious choice for us to get involved in something like this. In fact, we'd been thinking about a city challenge for a while, and it was almost serendipitous that we found out that the DOT was also thinking about a challenge. We met with Secretary Anthony Fox in October of last year, started comparing notes, Sophie and others on the team. We both decided very quickly there was a lot of alignment, and so that's why we decided to work in a partnership on this. What I'm excited about, listen, all the cities that applied, not just Columbus, but the 6 other finalists, the 78, all were very ambitious around reducing greenhouse gases from the transportation sector. Columbus in particular, I'll just give you a couple examples. Navigant Research, which is a really good organization that looks at the transportation sector, looked at Columbus, and they told us that based on current trends, that Columbus should expect to have 734 EVs by the end of 2018. Not that many if you live in the Bay Area, but they don't have the same incentives you all have to deploy electric vehicles. They committed to 3,200 in their proposal, plus hundreds of other vehicles in the public and private sector in terms of fleet vehicles. The 50 CEOs of the 50 largest companies in Columbus, Ohio, have all committed to buying an electric vehicle. This is the private sector bringing money to the table now. They've also committed over $3 million in investments for workplace charging in all 50 of those companies. This is unprecedented. The White House, in fact, is doing backflips over this kind of commitment from the city of Columbus. So from our view, the city is being very ambitious in terms of tackling this. And the final piece, and really probably the most important if you actually do the math around the climate part, is the commitment of American Electric Power, which is the largest utility in that region. They operate in 11 different states. Their headquarters is in Columbus. This is a utility that has largely historically been driven by coal-fired power plants. They are committing to talking about climate change now in electric vehicles. They are committing to almost 1 gigawatt of carbon-free energy in the form of wind and solar as part of their commitment here. So this is really, as you said, unprecedented. The partnerships that have been born out of this, I think, across the spectrum of activities have been really impressive. And we think this serves as a really powerful narrative for other cities across the country.
Great, thank you. Sophie, collectively the city has probably spent thousands of hours on their applications, and then you had the good luck to read them all. So what we want to know is, what did you learn? Are there certain themes that emerge from these proposals again and again that you see in city after city that in your mind just have to be part of a smart city, however we're defining that? And what does our audience need to know about what those elements are?
Sure. Well, again, thanks for having us here. I think I want to put the Smart City Challenge a little bit in context, which is that Secretary Fox, he's been at the Department of Transportation for a few years now and has really had a different approach to transportation policy. And just quickly, and I won't spend too much time on this, over the past year, the department has leveraged $350 million in advanced transportation technologies, and the Smart City Challenge is the biggest portion of that and a huge piece of it, but a lot of these projects that spent hours going through those applications are actually moving forward because of that funding and other funding from the private sector. So, so this is definitely not in a silo of the Smart City Challenge. I just want to make sure that folks know that. I think one thing that we learned going through the challenge, we debated about the name of it because nobody really knows what a smart city is. Especially 6 months ago, we really didn't know that, or I guess a year ago now. What I've come to understand a smart city as is a city that really understands its problems and then finds the technologies that fit those problems. And as we were going through the 78 proposals, there were definitely some challenges that stood out, and there were hundreds of challenges that the city's identified, but climate change is certainly one of them, income inequality, access to jobs, first mile, last mile, congestion. Those were some of the big ones that we heard about, and I think some of those solutions that really stood out as the most common and maybe the low-hanging fruit in terms of being able to address those were public Wi-Fi, so allowing folks who don't have cell phones or don't have data plans to be able to access a mobility app. That's going to increase their ability to use transit. Connected vehicles, these are on the roads now being tested both by the Department of Transportation and private sector. Low-speed autonomous vehicles to address first mile, last mile, so that's sort of shorter distances that we just need to connect people to transit. And then obviously expanding electric vehicle deployment, as Spencer just mentioned, were a lot of the things that we saw out there. But there are lots out there, and the 78 proposals are all available online, so if you go to transportation.gov, you can go through those, and they're a pretty interesting read.
Yeah. And really a follow-up question for both of you is, you read all these proposals, regardless of who won. What were the ideas that you found to be the most exciting? What impressed you the most? And did this challenge affirm the idea, sort of the promise of challenges, which is that those responding to the challenges might have better ideas than you had to begin with. You might unearth some interesting things just by virtue of the competition. And are there a couple of ideas that are so compelling that you want to see those move forward, regardless of whether they came out of Columbus or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. Sophie named a few of the things that emerged, and we would agree. Listen, I think that the opportunity was really unique, and I want to emphasize what Sophie said at the outset. Secretary Fox took a very different approach. He deserves, and his team deserves, a ton of credit for not being prescriptive. I think one of the reasons that you saw such a great response was reflective, I think, of a pent-up demand that exists within cities, but it was this idea that, you know, for Vulcan, it wasn't a big deal for us to say, hey, tell us your good ideas. I think it was quite a big deal for a federal agency to say, hey, we're not going to tell you how to do this. You tell us what the good ideas are. And I think cities felt empowered. So that, to me, was the #1 most important thing of this, is that we were allowing cities to articulate a vision. And I think the public-private partnership that was sort of built into the challenge was also helpful in inspiring people and maybe giving cities the idea that maybe this is a little bit different. So we were really proud to be a partner on that. Here's 3 things that emerged for us. And again, we were focused on greenhouse gas emission reductions and the electrification of the transportation system. The other 11 elements of the proposals are really important as well, and so and our focus is on this piece. So within that narrow slice, there's a perception out there that the only thing you can electrify is light-duty vehicles by sort of the average person looking at this issue. In fact, there are drayage vehicles, freight-moving vehicles that are fully electric, forklifts, and some of the applications, for example, Kansas City built in this drayage vehicle concept that they were going to electrify their drayage vehicles. That is a great example of ambitious thinking. In fact, we were in Europe. We took the city of Columbus to visit 3 of the leading cities that are deploying EVs in Europe, and we saw fully electric garbage trucks. So hey, there is no vehicle that you can't electrify now. It's a matter of cost, range. I mean, there's some things you need to consider, but this is coming, folks, and I think that's one of the things that's really exciting. The second thing I'd mention is the level and breadth of the partnerships that emerged. Even in a city like San Francisco, which was a finalist, which we thought they have all these wonderful partnerships already like nailed down, they came back to us and said, this opportunity enabled us to have conversations we've never had in the city of San Francisco, to build partnerships that just did not exist around transportation. That's fantastic to hear, and I think that occurred in all of the cities that applied. And then the third, another very specific example, the city of Portland, which was a finalist in our neighborhood, they proposed something called the EV Showcase, which is where you bring all of the electric vehicles together in one showroom. And this addresses a real barrier for EV adoption in most parts of the country, where you go into a dealership lot and there might be a couple EVs buried in the back. There's a few auto manufacturers that are doing a better job of that, but many of them are not, and they can't really control the dealerships. So how do you work with local dealerships to actually highlight this technology, get it in front of the consumer, get the salespeople incentivized and educated so they can sell these vehicles? The city of Portland and Drive Oregon, which is the NGO that operates in Oregon, has now just been funded, I think, by the Department of Energy, and I don't know if they're receiving DOT funding as well, to roll out this new model for an EV showroom or showcase. So those are 3 examples that really stood out as innovative thinking, and there's 24 more, but those are 3.
Excellent. So ever since Columbus, it was exciting when Columbus was announced, and I think for a lot of cities it was also not a great day when Columbus was announced. And there was just so much momentum and excitement created by this challenge. I've been thinking about how that gets carried forward after the money is all awarded. And we have a very diverse audience here at Meeting of the Minds. We have philanthropists, we have private sector representatives, we have local government, we have advocates. So I wanted to ask you, thinking of our audience as on the leading edge of change in their cities, what guidance would you offer to those in the audience in any sector who want to take these concepts from Smart City Challenge back into their own communities?
Sure, I'll take that. I think one thing that we learned talking to the cities was that they are overwhelmed by tech companies coming in with the solution that's going to solve all their problems, but they don't necessarily know how to negotiate or how to speak to tech companies, and tech companies don't know how to speak to cities. And I think advocates can do a really great job of helping the city to remember what they're trying to solve. That was a big piece for us, was just talking to the cities and saying, okay, what's the problem? And then we find the solution to match that. And I think that helps everybody work together better if we're clear about what we're trying to solve. And I think keeping the cities on track of what they're trying to do is really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really key. Listen, Columbus is just overwhelmed by love and interest. So they're trying to navigate all of the, as Sophie said, companies that are going to solve their problems. We as a philanthropy are trying to help them navigate this. We brought in experts in the field. We convened a week-long set of workshops with experts from around the country to help them amass the knowledge and wherewithal to navigate that. But I think for cities, communities that are entering into this space, having partners that have the expertise to help vet all of these great ideas is going to be really critical, because otherwise you just get, I mean, they're drowning, you know, in interest. So I would agree with Sophie. I think that's going to be a really key for the government, public sector folks in the room. Think about who your partners are that can help you vet and validate the technologies. Great.
And we are 12 days out from what is to me still a somewhat terrifying day of electing our new president. In keeping with this question about momentum, what recommendations would you have for the next administration, other than hiring Sophie, to keep the momentum from the Smart City Challenge going forward and to take it to the next level?
Well, one thing I think I would add to, Spencer mentioned this earlier, but you know, we took the lesson of cutting across silos, that the cities were talking to each other in new ways and talking to other departments. So it wasn't just the Department of Transportation within the city, it was the Department of, you know, the utilities and the advocacy groups within the city. We did the same thing at the federal level. So that was talking to the Department of Energy and coordinating with the Department of Commerce on how we were going to work with the cities and Columbus going forward. And so I think that's a really important lesson. And just one example that I want to bring up from Columbus of these sort of cross-cutting ideas that came out of that is that they're using transportation as a solution to a healthcare issue, which is addressing infant mortality in an underserved neighborhood. And that's an idea that you only get when you have all of those people in the same room. And we need to take that sort of as a lesson to the federal government as well.
I want to open up the microphones in case anybody in the audience has a question about the Smart City Challenge for our panelists. Please.
Thinking about integration, which we were talking about last time, and systems thinking, which they talked about in the last panel, have you thought about the issues in terms of transportation relative to Columbus with, say, EPA, as far as coordinating transportation and being more efficient to reduce air emissions, how you can change traffic patterns, the parking related, again, back to air emissions and health, as you mentioned, like here in the Bay. Obviously, there's a huge issue with trucks and trains, ships. Coordinating that in the transportation, again, in the context of health and environmental would be one. And then obviously the standards, maybe involving NIST at the federal level with EPA or DOE or whatever. Is there an integration piece that you're expecting that's going to be supporting Columbus going forward?
Well, there definitely is a role for the Department of Energy. We don't have a formal role with EPA, but I definitely think that they're interested in this space and taking a lot of interest in it. So some of it's going to be up to the next administration, but they're definitely paying attention to sort of the impacts of automation and shared use mobility, and I think that will feed into the conversation as what's happening in Columbus.
I'll tell you where it has come up, though, from the city side. The public sector, city government, they have some non-attainment issues with EPA, and they actually view this as an opportunity to give them some additional tools to address that issue. So this has come up, not from EPA's side necessarily, though that could change, but from the city itself, who has to deal with the non-attainment issues.
Well, I was thinking of this in the context of recently there was a project in San Jose talking about localized air emissions relative to transportation. There's another one now with Google on driverless cars and doing air emissions rights. So to me, that seems like a natural fit with what is going to be done in Columbus.
Okay, let's go to another question up front.
One of the challenges of innovation is the ability to embrace failure and learn from it. a challenge with the Smart Cities Initiative is you have put such a high-powered microscope on Columbus. Do you think they still have the capacity to fail properly or fail effectively?
There was a little bit of a morning after effect when they won. They're like, yeah, we won. Oh, we won. So certainly I think there is some, a little bit of anxiety around, failure. I think it's our job collectively, the USDOT, Vulcan, who's sponsoring this, to make sure that they have the space to fail in a few places. But we're working hard to set them up for success. So, we're trying to minimize those risks of failure, but certainly there's going to be some failure, I think,
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at Columbus's application, it's actually a bunch of little pilots. And so I think there is room for failure on some of those and the ability to adjust. We have a cooperative agreement with Columbus, so that means we can change the plan as things work or things don't work. And so I think there's more room for failure than you might think, although I agree that there's definitely a lot of attention on Columbus. The other thing I'll add is that we just awarded $65 million in additional grants for advanced transportation technology all around the country. And so obviously not quite to the same scale as Columbus, but I think there are going to be other experiments out there that they'll all be talking to each other and learning from each other. And so hopefully that helps a little bit with that.
Okay, let's go to the back. Maybe just one more question.
All right, thank you. As a university researcher, one of the things that's exciting about the challenge is the deployment of all of these technologies across an urban system. I think that's a tremendous opportunity to draw lessons for other cities. Another piece of it that I'm interested in is the process and collaboration. And as I looked at the applications, that was a particular strength of Columbus that's really, really exciting. And I wonder for you as folks who are leading these efforts and supporting these efforts, are there ways to document the process and collaboration and draw lessons from that for other cities as they're trying to tackle these same challenges and really think about these big system changes?
Yeah, I would say Columbus already brags about this because there's a Harvard Business School case study that's called the Columbus Way, which I haven't read it, but they talk about it a lot. So part of it's been documented, but I think it's really true. Sophie may have some other thoughts. We have required the city in phase 3, the final year of the project, to create a playbook of what they've done and share that. Vulcan Philanthropy will be making information available sort of in real time over the course of the grant. And I think both our organizations are encouraging cities to continue this conversation in a variety of forms and fashions. So I think we would agree there's a great learning opportunity through this project, and we want to optimize and maximize it. So yeah, I would agree. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have requirements for Columbus to report on a number of metrics and also to do a lot of outreach events. And I know they're getting swamped with invites to all kinds of speaking engagements, but I know DOT is also going to sort of be helping with that effort of just trying to get the lessons learned out there. And also, as I mentioned, all those other communities that are going to be doing these other projects, to have them all talking to each other and sharing that information, because I think it's really important.
So I want to ask, thinking about kind of next steps, what happens now? Columbus is, as you said, busy ideating their implementation. What's going to happen in the other cities? And do you believe there's an opportunity to help other cities connect with Columbus, learn from what they're doing, as well as just find efficiencies? It sounds like there's sort of some common themes that came out of the applications. How can we avoid each city sort of recreating the wheel as they move towards a smart city and find those efficiencies and economies of scale?
Well, if you look at the projects, and we have all of these online, if you look at there are 15 communities that we just announced a couple weeks ago. Columbus, we have connected vehicle pilots. They're all doing somewhat different things already. So I think not all of that was intentional, but there are a lot of different theories being tested. And I think as long as the data is open and we're sharing all of that, I think there's a lot of potential there. And one thing I'll mention is that in 6 months, the 7 finalist cities were able to leverage $500 million from public, private, and federal funds. And that money's out there and it's gonna go somewhere. And I think, making sure that it goes to researching these topics into a way that we can actually learn it and take those lessons is really important.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I would just say the other opportunity for those cities, for the 78, for other cities that are interested, is the NGO community is interested in providing some interface and that connective tissue The funding community, so the philanthropy community, we're coordinating, we're talking about how to best deploy our resources so that we create this ecosystem where cities can learn, where the research is mobilized, and we think that all is going to be really important as we all move forward together.
Great, so we're almost out of time. I see Gordon lurking. I'm going to give each of our panelists just quick 30 seconds to give a final closing thought, anything you particularly want this audience to take away with them from the Smart City Challenge as they go into happy hour.
Want to go? Yeah. Oh, I get so. So, listen, I think you know, if you're a city, or if you're a stakeholder or a company that exists within a city, I think my number one bit of advice, because there will be more money coming for sure, albeit, you know, from philanthropy and the federal government, I think you're going to see more resources poured into this because of the success of this program. So my first line advice is be ambitious. Be really ambitious. We're at an inflection point in this technology. We've heard this the last 2 days. All of these trends are coming forward, whether we want them or not, and the cities are where they're going to be implemented and deployed. So if you're a city, be ambitious. There are, as Sophie mentioned, over $500 million in leverage funding came in response to this. So there are partners waiting in the wings for your ideas, but cities need to lead, and there's a lot of innovative business models as well, and I think we've heard about some of those as well. One final specific thought for the electric vehicle standpoint of the electrification of transportation, the electric utilities are your friends in this. Work with them, reach out, don't bring them in late. I think we heard in the cyber security talk, don't bring cybersecurity as a patch on the end. Don't bring your electric utility into this conversation as sort of an afterthought. Work with them right now, because this is one of the few areas where they see business growth. They are eager to partner with cities, counties, states, to figure out how to take advantage and best mobilize this technology. So I would say, you know, utilize, they're really influential, and get them aboard early on. So those would be my recommendations.
Last word,
Sure,
Sophie.
very quickly. You know, I think at DOT, we think that shared use mobility, advanced transportation technology, automation has a huge potential for safety, mobility, climate, equity, but a lot of this is really uncertain, and that's why we need to keep studying it, and that's why we've invested, you know, we've leveraged $350 million in the last year. That's a huge amount of data that we're going to be getting over the next couple of years, and we're going to need your help to think about what that means for our country. So thanks so much.
Excellent. Please join me in thanking our panelists.